Let's go.
You're listening to the Cage Nation TV Prizefight Podcast. Coming to you from the Candid Cameron Studios in State College, Pennsylvania. Here's your host, Albert Cameron.
My name's Albert Cameron, and I live in the Northeast, which means I may or may not be getting a ton of snow this weekend. Thank you, everyone, for joining me for the Prizefight Podcast this week. Again, Friday being podcast day. Friday also means it's time for the Friday 5. This week's Friday 5 was 5 really bad movies about combat sports. Head on over to CageNationTV.com, check that out. This is the part of the show where we want to highlight local musicians. Your original music will be used to intro the show, maybe used as kind of like some of the bumper music, and then your original song is going to carry out the end of the programming. So if you are a musician who composes and records their original compositions, shoot us an email right now at CageNationTV@gmail.com. Shoot one of us a Facebook instant message to the page. Get a hold of us on Twitter. That would be fine. And we want to focus on your original music to get you heard. We're musicians ourselves, and we certainly appreciate the platform. And we want to get your music out there. We want everything to sound fresh, and we can't do that without you. This week on the Prizefight Podcast, last week we talked about Phil Brooks, how he may be getting his legitimate shot. And this week I saw something that really just kind of pissed me off. I'm searching through SureDog.com today thinking like, what are we going to talk about on the podcast? And then I see this link to this website. It looks like crap. It looks like it's like junk, spam. It's gonna fish for my passwords and steal all my information and tell the world that my bank account information. It just looks bad. So I click on the link because I'm a moron sometimes and I like to follow things. And I end up at this website called grunge.com. And I come across an article about wrestlers who would totally dominate MMA, bro. I hate that. I mean, as much as everyone likes people who talk and write like they're a middle school girl, wrestlers who would totally dominate MMA, it's comparing apples to oranges. In fact, I think we talk about professional wrestling too much on the Cage Nation TV network of programming. But this guy, Jason Iannone, has got my attention. So now I'm going to use my platform to not completely destroy, but to completely air my opinion. Some folks call that a bully pulpit, but I've got a microphone and he's got his website, so all's fair in love and war. His list of wrestlers of people who would totally dominate MMA starts off with an extremely bad example. He's saying Alberto Del Rio would totally dominate MMA, and I completely disagree because he's already been proven wrong once before. If you guys are fans of the Pride Fighting Championship, you would know that Alberto Del Rio was also known as Dos Caras Jr., who fought Mirko Cro Cop in the Bushido series. Dos Caras Jr. had one fight and one fight only in the Pride Fighting Championships, and it's because he got knocked out very, very short in the first round. And the Pride had the 10-minute first rounds. So we got 10-minute round. He got KTFO'd extremely early by eating that left high kick of Mirko Cro Cop. The right leg sends you to the hospital. The left leg sends you to the cemetery. And it was lucky that he made it out the way he did. Now, he did wear a mask during the fight, which I thought was weird. You wouldn't be able to do that here in North American mixed martial arts because, frankly, it's just silly and may impede vision. Athletic commissions will say no. So Jason Iannone believes that Alberto Del Rio would dominate in MMA. My brother, you could not be more wrong. He's approaching 40 in Pennsylvania. We get kind of iffy whenever we approaching over 36, I believe. 35 or 36. Then we have to go through a whole lot more medical testing. And he's good at the predetermined WWE professional wrestling. Let him stick with it. At 40 years old, it's kind of hard to be thinking about turning face and getting into another career. Next on this list is some guy named Cesaro, which I need to admit ignorance. I don't follow WWE at all. I used to, back in the 90s when it didn't suck. But this guy is your typical big guy. I mean, I don't want to say he's juicing, but I mean, he has a really, really good trainer, I guess. He looks like he hasn't displayed a whole lot of prowess in combat sports other than he does a move that was really big in the 70s called the big swing. And that's about it. Then we have some guy named Seth Rollins who Jason Iannone describes this guy as he plays whiny, cowardly corporate suck-up on TV, but because he looks big, he might be a legitimate threat. Well, that doesn't really get you anywhere. As we discussed last week, the WWE is predetermined. We know who's going to win before everyone gets into the ring. At least we don't, but the powers that be do. How is any of that going to translate into a 15-minute, 3-round fight with anyone to be a legitimate fight? He's a great actor. Maybe he should go to Hollywood. Maybe he should get on stage, go to Broadway. There is nothing about this guy that says, I would be really good at mixed martial arts. We think about professional wrestlers who have done mixed martial arts. We think of Brock Lesnar, who was an NCAA Division I champion. He had really good amateur credentials. He went to professional wrestling. He did very well. He came to the UFC and became heavyweight champion. The world's most dangerous man, Ken Shamrock, was actually a professional wrestler in Georgia before he went went to Pancrase and ultimately the UFC. But he had the ability. He learned. He was able to turn that into mixed martial arts ability. Nothing about this guy says he can do that. Dan the Beast Severn, probably one of the most popular transplants between professional wrestling and mixed martial arts. Dan Severn, again, with extensive wrestling and judo training that made him compatible with both sports. Next on the list is some guy named Samoa Joe, which I believe competed for the TNA, and there's a nasty joke in there somewhere. If I understand from all of his promos, he does like training promos, like he's actually training for a fight, but again, he is training to be predetermined. He looks a little soft. I mean, he looks like he could fight at heavyweight, but he doesn't look as cut as a Cain Velasquez, a Junior Dos Santos, Alistair Overeem. You get what I'm saying. Looks like Frank Mir would tear through him easily, despite his wrestling gimmick of being the Samoan submission machine. Again, I don't know unless he actually gets in the cage and fights, but he's a professional wrestler with no credentials. I mean, I don't know. Taz, former ECW heavyweight champion, is a judoka. He has a black belt in judo. I mean, that I would believe would work. I mean, this guy, Samoa Joe, is really a Taz ripoff. Taz did have a pro wrestling match with Paul Varlins, early UFC veteran, who was an expert in trap fighting. To this day, I still don't know what trap fighting is, but Taz had a pro wrestling match with him. So you got Samoa Joe being Diet Taz. Nothing indicates that he would be any good. Next on the list, Ric Flair. Woo! And that one's going out to handsome Jim Ajay. Jason Iannone is saying that Ric Flair's daughter should be good at women's MMA, and I defy why. Women's MMA, the most popular women's MMA, is the UFC women's bantamweight division, and that division is ridiculously diluted. We had Ronda Rousey, who was a dominant champ, who was really fighting folks who weren't in her league. Holly Holm comes around, knocks her out. Now Ronda Rousey's not in the picture, but still, did that gap close at all? No. That gap is still wide open. Holly Holm's fighting Miesha Tate. Miesha Tate was always a close number 2 to Ronda Rousey, just never able to secure the victory. Do we think it's going to be different with Holly Holm? No. And then there is a big disparaging gap between those. So where does Jason Iannone think that Ric Flair's daughter Charlotte is going to fit into that mix? If she was any good at MMA or had the potential, I feel like she would have made the move now with as popular as Ronda Rousey and Holly Holm has been. And if she had an opportunity to compete, I feel like she would have. However, predetermined professional wrestling is just that, predetermined professional wrestling. Next on the list, and it looks like the last, is Daniel Bryan, or Bryan Danielson, depending on which independent professional wrestling circuit you follow, is a very good worker, I guess. He's kind of light, but hey, the MMA has lighter divisions. In Pennsylvania, lighter divisions seem to be the norm. It's kind of rare to find heavier guys. Daniel Bryan has a move that he calls the lapel lock. The lapel lock, it's to be feared in professional wrestling and predetermined competition. The lapel lock is an omoplata. Omoplata. They're teaching that to white belts in beginning Brazilian jiu-jitsu classes. The omoplata is a hold, and it has been used to submit opponents, but it's not a highly feared submission technique that not everyone can learn. Omoplata is one of those things that in order to earn your stripes in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, you have to be proficient at the omoplata. Daniel Bryan clearly has a penchant for grappling. He has inclinations towards grappling, towards becoming a competitor in grappling sports, but mixed martial arts is much more than grappling. It's much more than striking. It is a melting pot of all that. And I think what upsets me the most about professional wrestling fans thinking that their favorite wrestlers could come into the UFC and come into MMA and dominate, or they feel that mixed martial arts is not the same kind of competition or entertainment, it's because we're really comparing apples to oranges. UFC and mixed martial arts was never meant to compete with professional wrestling. It's just, I guess it's similar platform, one-on-one competition, but professional wrestling's predetermined, whereas mixed martial arts is not. So I feel like when you watch professional wrestling, you're watching it for the entertainment value. You're watching for the storylines that are going to play out. When you watch mixed martial arts, you're watching for something completely different, and that's why the two will never be comparable. And I really feel like this is the last time I'm going to waste any sort of airtime or any sort of programming on the discussion, because it just doesn't make sense for us. Jason Iannone and his 6 wrestlers who completely dominate in MMA, well, I feel you're wrong. And if you feel that I'm wrong, please feel free to take your platform and tell me so. I might pay attention, I might not, I don't know. But those 6 wrestlers who you feel would completely dominate in MMA, bro, I feel like would not. Starting off your list with Alberto Del Rio, who has stepped in the cage and has proven that he cannot hang with the world's best, and he can't even hang with Pride's best. And after Pride was bought out by Zuffa Entertainment, Pride fighters came over and they proved that they couldn't get the job done. Pride fighters coming over, Heath Herring was supposed to save the UFC heavyweight division, and he did not gain traction whatsoever. Rampage Jackson did okay. Anderson Silva, who really wasn't a Pride fighter, did okay. Takanori Gomi completely dropped the ball. Igor Vovchanchin and Fedor Emelianenko refused to even come over. Kevin Randleman wouldn't come back. So if you can't hang with Mirko Crow Cop and Pride, and Mirko Crow Cop didn't do as hot as everyone expected. If you can't hang with Mirko Crow Cop and Pride, you cannot hang with anyone in the UFC, period. And if Alberto Del Rio is your best, then you got nothing. My name is Albert Cameron. That's my time. Thank you for letting me sound off for you guys. Tune in next week for the Prizefight podcast, where we have no idea what's coming up next, but we're going to be nice and angry and entertaining about it. Make sure you visit CageNationTV.com, like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter, subscribe to us on YouTube. The videos are coming back. They're coming back shortly. The next season of Cage Nation TV, where we're going to be covering events, is going to be coming up. Pinnacle FC and Gladiators of the Cage both have events in March that we are planning on attending. So thank you again for listening to the Prizefight podcast. We'll talk to you guys next week. You have a good week. You have a good weekend. If you're in Pennsylvania, please be careful in that weather that you may or may not get. My name is Albert Cameron. I'm signing off. Thank you for tuning in to the Cage Nation Prizefight podcast. All rights reserved. 2015-2016 Planetary Sports. The Prizefight podcast is part of the Cage Nation Broadcast Network. For more information, visit www.cagenationtv.com.